Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, a non-knife making project, forging a hammer. Today I'll be forging a ball peen hammer. For those of you who've been following along with the Jake's Toolbox project, I made a whole bunch of tools for my son for his 21st birthday, and this is part of that project. If you want to check out some of the other tools that I did in that general project, I've put together a playlist, link in the cards and descriptions. Alright, no more preliminaries, let's jump right on in. I'll be forging the hammer from 4140 steel. 4140 is a hardenable chrome moly steel that's particularly useful for objects that receive a lot of impact and stress, like hammers. In this case, I'm using 1¼ stock, so it'll be a pretty beefy persuader. I'll start by necking down the material using a guillotine hardy tool to separate the striking surfaces from the eye. By the way, I made a video about the construction of this guillotine tool, so if you're interested in that, I'll include a link. By the way, I actually forged 2 of these hammers. The first was a little longer than I wanted, so if you notice the hammer shrinking a bit in the middle of the project, that's why. I'm just rotating the stock and whacking away, trying to maintain symmetry as I go. The next stage is to produce the eye. That's the hole in the center of the head that the handle goes through. I'll start by marking the locations and then punching them with a center punch. A note about making hammers. Punching this hole is the most critical part of the whole business. If you punch it off center, it's really hard to recover, so you want to put yourself in the best position for success on driving that eye. The more carefully you mark the locations for the hole and the more carefully that you drive into the hole, the better. You want to start on one side, make a little progress, then flip it. I'm using this tool that I made specifically for starting tool eyes on my forge press. But you can do this by hand. Anyway, push it in, flip, push it in, flip, repeat. There's really no need to rush this. Much more important to get symmetrical than to just jam it through real quickly. By working from both sides, you're able to kind of triangulate into the center and really get the best hole possible. Next, I'll use a drift which will go all the way through. Takes several passes to do this, and that just enlarges the hole and makes it straight through. Then I'll follow that with a tapering tool, which again will be driven from both sides, and that tool will create a taper in the eye from both sides. So once again, you're working from both sides, not just from one side. Once the eye is approaching roughly the right size, using the face of the anvil, I'll forge the cheek, that's the outer face of the hammer, right around the eye. You want this to be relatively wide so that you give the hammer plenty of surface area. This will keep the hammer head stable so it's less prone to rotating or wiggling off the handle. Look, I'm a knife maker, not a hammer maker, so this isn't the most refined thing I've ever made, but it basically hits the mark. So now I'll go ahead and use my belt grinder to refine the hammer head. I end up using quite a collection of different contact wheels and attachments by the time it's over, including my slack belt, 12-inch contact wheel, 3/4-inch contact wheel, and the flat platen. Now it's time to heat treat the hammer. Different kinds of steel heat treat in different ways. This is an oil hardenable steel, so I'll start by heating it in my forge. Then I'll plunge it into Parks number 50 heat treating oil, which is a fast quenching oil that approaches the quench speed of water. This helps with a thick part like this. It's not necessary that a hammer hardens all the way to the core of the head, but at least this way we're going to make sure that the faces are nice and hard. The thing about hardening big fat pieces of metal like this is that a lot of heat gets retained in the center. So if you cool it fast enough to harden that outer skin and then pull it out prematurely, the heat can bleed back out and basically keep it from hardening properly. Hey guys, quick plug here. You know, it takes a ton of work to make these videos. I try to use the best cameras, lights, audio equipment. I take a lot of shots. I do a lot of close-ups. All of it to help you learn more and make cooler stuff. So, if you want to help me make more and better videos, click the link for Patreon and help support the channel. All right, let's get back to the project. So after the steel has cooled completely, I'll temper it for 2 hours at 600 degrees. This is what's known as a spring temper, which is softer than you'd temper an edge tool, like a knife, for instance. This is because if a hammer's too hard, the faces can be brittle and they're likely to chip, sending shrapnel flying around your shop. Not cool. And then we'll make the haft, which is just a fancy word for handle. I'm using a big old chunk of 8/4 hard maple. Ash is the most common handle material, but I picked this up for free at my wood supplier, so perfect. I start by sawing out a rough blank on my bandsaw. Then I'll mark out the outlines, then saw those out, and then it's onto the belt grinder. As a knife maker, I use my belt grinder constantly, so this is one of those when you're holding a hammer, everything looks like a nail kind of deals. Woodworkers might find other ways to finish a handle like this, but for me, belt grinder is the most comfortable tool to use. When making a handle, the key area is the portion of the handle that goes through the eye. You want to shape this as carefully as possible with plenty of tri-fitting so that it mates really tightly. If you don't, it'll wobble. The top part should just barely fit through the skinniest part of the eye. Once that's shaped, I'll finish the rest of the haft. Now I'll take a pause and add my son's name using my CNC machine. As I said, this is part of an heirloom kind of project, so I'm really going the extra mile here. Next, I'll split the top of the handle with the bandsaw for insertion of a wedge to lock the head on the hammer. I want to make that wedge nice and tight. Then I just bang it in until it bottoms out. Then I'll clean up the top of the handle, making it flush with the head. All that's left is a little oil to spiff everything up. And here's the final version of the hammer. Like I said, there's a whole playlist of the other tools that I made for my son this year. Screwdrivers, chisels, hex drivers, a whole bunch of different stuff. So check that out if you're into tool making. Thanks, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. You know, I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. WalterSorrellsBlades.com.